Now here's the moment of truth. This is the 64 gig model. This is the highest end system. And full and play. Hi, I'm Alex Jordan from Learn Color Grading and FilmSimplified.com. Last year we tested the M1Max for DaVinci Resolve users. We were very impressed with them, and this year Apple just expanded the M1 lineup with two new processors, the M1Pro and the M1Max. The most important question here is, as a DaVinci Resolve user, which of these new computers should you buy, or should you even buy the old one? So if you're buying a new computer, which one should you get? And if you own the old one, should you upgrade? We will be answering all of these questions in this video and the upcoming videos. So these are the computers that we're going to be testing today. This is last year's model. This is the M1 with 16 gigabyte. This is the exact one that we tested last year, and I'm still using it. And these two computers here are the new models. So this is the one that comes with the M1Pro chip. It has 18 cores and 16 gigs of RAM. And this one here is the top-end model. It comes with the M1Max chip. It has 10 cores and 64 gigabytes of memory and 4 terabytes of storage. So we have all these computers, and we're going to be testing all of these now from the perspective of a DaVinci Resolve user. However, there's a problem. The problem is that I'm extremely satisfied with the performance of the M1Max from last year. So last year I tested two devices. So this is the 16 gigs model, and I also have the M1 Mac Mini with 8 gigs of RAM, and the performance is really satisfying. Actually, I've been using the Mac Mini with 8 gigs of RAM for the past year to edit most of my videos, and I've been having no issues at all. It's extremely fluid. So in order to test the new Macs, we need to push them to their limits. And due to me using these two systems for the past year, I know exactly where they fall short. So let's first talk about the tests. First of all, I have notes here. I'm going to be reading from my notes. It's been a lot of work. So first of all, the tests are going to be done in RAW. Why RAW? So why do we test only RAW today? Well, when it comes to video codecs, so H.264, H.265, the models from last year are extremely powerful. They just play most codecs basically like butter. I had no issue with playback or adding color effects with the M1Max from last year, which simply means that it's pointless to test these formats with the new Max because the old one just played them nicely. It had no trouble playing these formats at all. So in order to test these computers, we simply need to test formats that the models from last year, the M1s from last year, couldn't play smoothly. And simply that's RAW. And I know that last year we tested the M1Max, this one and the other one, using raw footage. There was a lot of raw footage that was tested. However, the raw footage that was tested last year is compressed RAW, of course. And there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, whenever I shoot RAW, I do shoot compressed RAW, which means these computers are totally, the last year's models are totally capable of playing compressed RAW. However, just to create a test, we will be filming at extremely low compression RAW formats that are very hard to play on any system. So today we're going to be testing footage from the Ursa 12K, the Canon C500 Mark II, and the EOS R5. Now, why these cameras? Because they shoot RAW. This one films in B-RAW, which basically is Blackmagic Design's RAW, so I'm expecting this to work nicely with Resolve. However, the raw footage from the other two, from the Canon, so from the R5 and from the C500 Mark II, have always proven to be a bit hard to play on most systems, so we'll see how this will go with the Canons and with the Blackmagic. No optimizations whatsoever. First of all, playback, timeline proxy mode is set to off. Then render cache is set to none. And the playback settings in the user section and references is set to automatic. So for the B-raw footage, we're decoding at 12K, full 12K, and we're simply changing the ISO. And for Canon C500 footage, we're using full res Canon. Note that you can use full res resolve or half resolution for easier playback. However, we're selecting full res Canon here because this is the hardest format to play, and we're simply changing the ISO. And again, for the Canon R5 footage, we're also selecting full res Canon, so no full res resolve, which is easier to play. It will play much smoother if you use resolve, but we're using full res Canon, and we're simply changing the ISO again. So these are the hardest conditions for playback. Also note that all the timelines are set to 4K. So even if we're playing like 12K or 8K, the timeline formats are set to 4K because this is the most popular delivery format if you're filming higher resolution footage. And finally, there are no color controls applied at all. However, the only thing we have here is that we're using the new color management system set for SDR from Resolve for color correction, and we did not add any color effects. However, before we start the test,
did you know that you can go to filmsimplified.com and sign up for our free DaVinci Resolve crash course where you can learn the basics of each tab in Resolve? Simply go to filmsimplified.com and sign up for free.
And now let's start the test. First, we'll start with the fusion test. Now, I created a composition that I know is very hard to play on any system. And actually, this fusion composition that I'm going to be playing now is almost impossible to play in full resolution on the on last year's models. So let's hope that the models from this year will be able to, especially the 64 gigs, hopefully it will be able to play it in real time. Then we're going to move into the next test, which is the playback, the playback. Let's start. This composition is pretty simple, but it's very hard to play on most machines. So let's start with last year's model. I'm simply going to make it full screen, hit play, and it's simply a simple line that is being drawn, and it cannot play it back in real time. Let's just go back to the beginning, play, and yeah, it cannot play one in real time, which simply means that it will not be able to play 4 of it in real time. This is just the same animation repeated multiple times, and it cannot play it back in real time, so I'm not going to try to play more in real time. So we're just gonna stop here because otherwise it's gonna crash now. Now, let's move to the base model of this year. So this is the base model of the new Max that were introduced. Full screen, I'll hit play, and again, it cannot play it back in real time in full resolution, which simply it means that it will not be able to play 4 of it in real time. Now let's move to the high-end model. This is the 64 gigs. With the high-end model, let's simply try to play once, and yeah, it plays once in real time. Then let's move to 4 instances of the same animation, and it cannot play it in real time. And of course, if we try to play more, it's still not going to work. So note that we're trying to push the system to its limit. All of these systems are totally capable of playing this much smoother if we switch the timeline proxy mode to quarter resolution. So I'm just going to come here to playback, proxy mode, quarter, playback, proxy mode, quarter. So if we try to play it once, you see with quarter resolution, even last year's model plays it back in real time. And if we try to play 4, last year's model plays it back in real time. And no matter how hard you push it, I guess it's just gonna, oh no, we broke this one at 4 instances of 4. However, let's try the highest end model and with optimization and see if it can play 4 in real time. So let's play. And again, not real time. So I guess it's a tie when it comes to Fusion for this particular test, of course. Fusion is a very complex system, but I mean, for this basic test that I use for most of the computers I use, it's basically a tie between all of them. So the first test is going to be the footage from the Ursa 12K. This is shot in 12K RAW and it's shot with a compression of 5:1. So let's start with last year's M1 Mac. I'll simply hit play, and this is one clip, and this is, remember, 12K with 5:1 compression, and it's just playing with no problems at all. I had a drop frame a minute earlier, but now there is no, there are some drop frames now. Let's move to 2 clips, play, and yeah, it cannot play it in real time. Let's move to 3 clips, 4, sorry, play, and for some reason it plays 4 clips in real time, but not 3. There it started dropping frames here, and as you can see, it's just dropping frames. So let's move to the 14-inch model. This is the base model with the 14-inch, again, full screen, and let's play the same footage, and this is the Ursa 12K, 5:1 compression, and it just plays it in real time, no problem at all. Let's move to the next test, which is 2 Ursa clips, and again, playing it with no issues at all. Let's then move to new clips, 12K, and it's just playing it back in real time with no issues at all. And finally, the same test with the 64 gigs model. This is the top of the line. I'll play, and it's playing the Ursa footage in real time. That's to be expected. Then let's move to 2 clips, play, and again, they're playing in real time, no issues at all. Finally, 4 clips, let's play, and again, it doesn't face any issue playing 4 clips at all. This is all like 12K clips. So all of this is to be expected because we're using Blackmagic Raw, of course, which is optimized for DaVinci Resolve. And as we can see, even the old model can play 5:1 compression with B-Raw 12K. It had some drop frames, but remember, we're pushing the system to its limits here. And it just worked fine with no, I would say it passed, frankly, because you could have totally lowered the resolution a bit and played it back in real time, but you know, you make up your mind. These are the results for the B-Raw. Okay, now this is the second test. This is 8K, not 12K RAW. So we have 8K footage. However, the 8K footage is being recorded and played back at 60 frames per second. Remember, the first test was at 24 frames per second. So it's doing a lot more work here because we're playing 60 frames per second. So again, full screen, this is 8K RAW, 5:1, 60 frames per second, and this is last year's model, and it cannot play it in real time. You can see there are a lot of hiccups. So as long as it cannot play 1 file, let's move to 2 files, and again, cannot play it in real time, of course on full resolution. Finally, 4, play, and it's not playing in real time. So now let's move to the 14-inch model, base model, and again, it's 8K, 60 frames per second, full screen, play, and there was a hiccup at the beginning, but now it's playing it in real time, which is cool. Now let's move to 2 files, play, and again, still playing it in real time, no issues at all. And finally, let's move to 4 clips and play. And now we're having some trouble. No, there was some trouble in the beginning, but we're playing 4 60 frames per second 8K clips in RAW with compression of 5:1. I mean, wow. And now I think this is pointless because this one can play the footage in real time, but it doesn't matter. We have to do the test. This is 8K, again, 60 frames per second, 5:1. Playing 1 clip, real time, no problem at all. Okay, 2 clips, play, and no hiccups. It just plays everything smoothly in real time. Finally, this is 4 clips, and we're starting to get some hiccups here. You see it's 60 frames per second, and it's not playing everything in real time. Now, we're moving to a much harder test. This is the footage. This is 5.9K from the C500, and it's shot in Canon RAW. And I'm expecting this to be a bit harder to play. So let's start with last year's model and hit play. And of course, it cannot play this in real time. Yeah, it's struggling to play this in real time. Now, remember, this is this is a codec by Canon, and it's not really optimized for DaVinci Resolve, which simply means that because it couldn't play the first one, that if we play two files, it's going to be the same thing. It cannot play the files in real time. And let's just make this shorter, move to 4 files, play, and of course it cannot play these files in real time. Now, here's the real test. I totally expected the last year's model not to be able to play the 5.9K footage from the C500 Mark II RAW because it's this format have never been easy to play on any system. So let's see if the new systems can play it. So this is 24, of course all of this is 24 frames per second. I'm gonna hit play, and yeah, it's choppy. It cannot play it in real time. And let's try 2 clips, and of course if it cannot play one in real time, it's pointless to test 2, but 2 and it's not playing it in real time. Finally, let's move to 4, and of course it cannot play this format in real time. Remember, these are 24 frames per second. Now here's the moment of truth. This is the 64 gig model. This is the highest end system. And full and play, and it cannot play it back in real time in full resolution. Remember, we're turning off all optimizations here, so nothing is being optimized for playback, so this is the worst case scenario. But again, I believe it should have been able to play this in real time, but it's not. And of course, let's move to 2 clips. Again, it cannot play it back in real time. Finally, 4 clips, and of course, it cannot play it back in real time. So when it comes to the C500 footage in RAW, unfortunately, none of these computers can play it back in real time. Now, I had another test lined up, which is the C500, but in 60 frames per second, in the same format, 5.9K RAW, but in 60 frames per second. However, if the systems couldn't play 24, I'm not sure why are we testing 60 frames per second, but yeah, it cannot play it. And let's just jump to the most powerful one and see if it can play the 60 frames per second clip from Canon, and it couldn't play the 24, so I can't see why it will play the 60 frames per second. Now, the last test is the 8K RAW from the R5, Canon R5, and it's basically at 24 frames per second. So let's start with last year's model, and of course it cannot play it back in real time at all, and it's pointless to test the rest of the the 2 files and the 3 files. I mean, it can't play even one. So let's move to this year's model. So R5 8K RAW, and again it cannot play it back in real time. So on the high-end system, this is again the R5 8K RAW, play, and it cannot play one file in real time. And which simply means that if we jump to 2 or even 4 files, again, it will not be able to play these files in real time. Please note that all optimizations are turned off, and we're pushing these systems to their limits. However, if we do any optimization, like for example lowering the playback resolution or any other optimization, they will be able to play things in a much better way. However, we're just trying to push these systems to their limits in order to answer the question, which one should you buy? So, as you can see, so far I couldn't find a test or a certain format that these two can play that last year model can't. Everything that this can do, these were able to do. Everything this one last year model couldn't do, these two new models, even the 64 gigs, couldn't do. This might sound like a bad thing, but it's actually great news, because M1Max from last year, so the M1s, of course, they're still being sold by Apple, and the iMac, the M1 iMac, are extremely powerful for their price. It's an unbelievable value for the price. So this is great news. This simply means that you definitely do not, unless you know exactly why you're buying these, for most people, for most YouTubers, for most filmmakers, Resolve from, of course, discussing everything from Resolve perspective. Last year models are extremely powerful, and you can simply get away with just buying one of the old ones. I mean, like, and I can't remember the price for a new iMac with M1, but it's really affordable when compared to these two. And I want to emphasize that I rarely actually film in these resolutions that we tested today. That's why I had to film new footage, because usually I shoot compressed footage, and even if it's raw, I shoot highly compressed raw footage. And I usually shoot basically in HD or 4K maximum. Unless the camera, of course, didn't allow for this. I don't want you to get under the impression that you need to film with these resolutions. I certainly never do. So yeah, that was a note. You just focus on the art. Okay, and if you have any questions or any specific tests that you want me to do, please leave a note in the comments. And in the next video, we're going to be testing Resolve on these two new Macs against Resolve on a similarly priced PC. So I hope you like this. If you like it, please visit us at filmsimplified.com, where you can join our free DaVinci Resolve course that is designed for the absolute beginner and will take you through every tab in Resolve. Thank you.
filmsimplified.com.